Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you guys how I edit some of my photos on the Sony a6000, and I'll be using Adobe Lightroom today. I'm not a professional editor or anything, but hopefully you guys can learn something from what I do and have some fun while we do it. Alright, so the first photo we have here is of Mount Cascade in Banff. I have about 40,000 photos of this mountain, but let's see what we can do with it. Alright, so starting off, let's boost the exposure just a tiny bit. Then we're going to push the contrast up to 50. And already you can see it's popping quite a bit. And then let's take blacks down to 30. And then I like to come down here to the color mixer, and there's some greens in the trees that we can kind of make them pop a bit better. Make them stand out, put the saturation up. And kind of don't be afraid to wiggle it around a bit to see what you're actually affecting. Bump that up. What else? Alright, then we can go to the oranges. Again, just slide it a couple times, see what you're affecting. Bring up the saturation a tiny bit. And then those yellow bushes are kind of a bit bright, so we can bring the luminance down a bit. That'll darken it up a tiny bit. And let's go back up. Maybe we'll put the shadows up a tiny bit, just so that we can get more detail in the trees, because it's a bit dark there. That looks good. And then let's find some blues. Kind of keep it the color that it is, and then I'll just boost the saturation a bit. Get that nice blue tinge to the mountain. And then let's scroll down. Go to the clarity. If you bring it all the way up, you can really see that it makes it look a bit ridiculous in my opinion. So you want to kind of be a bit careful with how much you actually put on your photo. That looks maybe a bit less. Go with 20. Put a tiny bit of texture in there. Dehaze it a tiny bit. Dehaze just kind of, I don't even know how to explain what that does, but you can see what it does. Just kind of put a tiny bit of that. And then the way I edit, I like to put some vignetting on my photos. Just kind of draws your eye into the subject a bit more, I find. That's just a personal preference. You guys don't have to do that. And then we can go up and grab this linear gradient here. Slide this down. This is a great way to kind of just focus the effects that you're making on one part of the picture. So right now we're just working on the sky. So we can bring the exposure down a tad, bring the highlights down, just so we can get a bit more detail in the sky. But you don't really want to overdo it. There's a fine line. Put the contrast up a bit. And I'd say that's pretty much done. You can see the before and the after here. So again, I just did some really kind of basic, quick adjustments there, and the difference even that makes with a raw photo is night and day. Alright, so this next photo, this is actually one from my latest POV video that you can watch here. So let's see what we can do with this. Let's bring the exposure slightly up. Again, bring the contrast. Bring it to 40 this time. Bring the highlights down. Bring the blacks slightly down. Then if you come to the tone curve here, I always like to put 3 dots. I mostly just move the bottom one. You can kind of see how it makes the shadows a bit crispier, so you don't really want to overdo it, or else it looks a bit weird. So just kind of fine tune it. Looks good. And we'll come down to the colors here. I don't really like the green grass, so let's kind of change it to more of a yellow. Make it more of a fall kind of color. Bring this one to orange. Keep that one the way it is. Just kind of boost it slightly in saturation. And then let's come down to the clarity again. I'll just put a tiny bit. Don't want to overdo it. Dehaze. Put a tiny bit on it. Again, I'll put some vignetting on it. Just because the way I shot this, the corners and top and bottom aren't really too sharp. So we'll just kind of concentrate the focus on all the leaves that actually are in focus. And bring the shadows down a bit. Yeah, I think that looks pretty decent. You can see the before and the after. Okay, so here's another one that's from one of my other POV videos. It's a nice mountainside landscape with a road going through it. So let's see what we can do for this. So let's boost the contrast, bring it up to 40-ish. We won't mess with the highlights just yet. Bring the blacks down to 40, looks good. And then we'll go to the tone curve, kind of do the same things we did last time. Just kind of play with this ever so slightly. That looks good. I should bring it down a bit more, and then we can go up to the shadows and kind of boost those just so we can maintain the quality in the trees. And then let's go down to the greens. Oops. There we go. Alright, so let's slide these greens over, kind of make them a bit more dramatic, I guess. Slide saturation slightly. Those look good. Then sometimes I like to go to this and just put a tiny bit of a teal blue in the shadows. Just adds a bit of a look to it, I guess. And then go to the clarity, put a bit of that on it, dehaze it just a tad. Alright, and then we're going to grab the linear gradient again, bring that down, slide the highlights all the way down, bring the exposure down, and you can see how much of the sky that we can actually bring back with this. And then boost the contrast. a tiny bit of saturation on it, just so we can get a bit of blue up in the sky again. Dehaze it a tiny bit. That looks good. Alright, and then we'll bring another gradient up. Oops. Kept all my same settings, we don't want that. So here, we're just affecting mostly the road, I guess. And bring the exposure down a bit. Add a bit of contrast to it. Bring down the highlights. And then put some clarity on it. And it just kind of makes the road a bit sharper, I guess. That looks pretty good. And yeah, I'd say that's pretty much done the way I want it. You can check out the before and the after here. Alright, so this one is a portrait of myself that my old roommate took of me. So let's see what we can do with this. Right off the bat, maybe bring up the exposure just a tad. Contrast, bring it up to 40 again. Bring the highlights all the way down just so that we can get all the stuff in the background. Bring the blacks down to 30-ish. And you'll kind of see that I'm kind of doing the same things over. That's just my style and how I edit my photos. Bring that slightly down, make it a bit darker. And then let's go to the greens again, find those. Don't be afraid to zoom in a tiny bit just so you can see what you're doing. Bring up the saturation on those. Bring these ones in. You can see it really makes them a lot richer of the green. Bring the saturation. That looks pretty good. And put some clarity on it, just a tad, not too much. Dehaze it a tiny bit. Oh yeah, maybe I'll crop this. Because you see how on my left shoulder, there's no gap between where my jacket is in the background. But on this side, you can see there's that tiny bit of gap. I don't really want that there. So I'll bring that in. Actually, let's do this. There. That looks better. That blue in my hoodie, let's kind of see what we can. I'll just keep it the way it is, but kind of boost the saturation on it a tiny bit, make it a bit bluer. That looks good. And then when you're editing people, their skin tones can kind of get a bit funky when you've been doing some editing, or maybe the white balance wasn't properly set in your camera. So what I like to do, right now my skin's looking a bit pink, I guess. So we're gonna grab the brush tool and we're just gonna kind of brush over all my skin. Make sure you get all of it. And then we'll go up to the temperature, bring it up to the more warmer side. That looks good. And then it kind of still looks a bit pink, so we'll bring it to the green side, just a tad. That looks pretty good. And then another fun thing you can do with portraits is zoom into their eye. You can grab the radial gradient, put that over one of my eyeballs, kind of boost the exposure. Now with this, you want to be a bit delicate with it because you can really overdo it and make it just look unnatural, I guess. So we'll bring the exposure up a bit, put the saturation up, get a bit more blue in those eyes. That looks alright. Then same thing for the other eye. That looks good. I feel like this one's a bit brighter than the other one, so let's bring that down. That looks good. Bam. And then last but not least, put a tiny bit, it's not too noticeable, tiny bit of vignetting on it, just for fun. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that one. You can check out the before and the after. And that's gonna be it for this video, I guess. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and learned something, had a bit of fun. If you have any other video suggestions or anything you want to see, just drop it in the comments and I'll get back to you. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one.